It's Ben Sorensen here, and this is my Druid's Garden with a very, very special presentation. From time to time we'll be bringing you not only fantastic information about herbs, but more importantly interviews with some influential and thought-provoking speakers, just like this man here, author of more books than I can count. And in particular the one that we're talking about today, of course, is Health Wars, and specifically in relation to immunisation. Of course, it is Philip Day. G'day mate, how are you?
Hello Ben, I'm fine. Good to see you.
Well, it was last week, I think it was the first time that I'd actually seen or heard of you, and I was so impressed by the quality of information that you were giving. Finally, there's, in my opinion, someone out there that's actually saying, or speaking the truth, I think, because I don't think it's about telling people what to do or how to think, but equipping them with honest information so they can make their own decisions about what's best for them. And I think that's something that you do very well. So immunisation or vaccination is really what I want to talk about today. Because we've got this push in Australia where they want every child to be immunised. In fact, there was a headmaster at one of the schools that was boasting quite proudly that they had the highest immunisation rates in their school. Now, what exactly is immunisation or vaccination, and what does it do to our bodies?
Well, the original idea behind it was that you would introduce a part of the disease, a type of the disease, and provoke an immune system reaction. And this was pretty much why, I mean, the word vaccination comes from vacca, meaning a cow, and this shows how originally they used to take extracts of cowpox virus and inject it into children in order to try to solicit an immune system reaction which would confer immunity. That's the theory behind it. In actual practice, it's dangerous because it bypasses all of the body's natural defences, and also the sophistication of some of the vaccines today is such that you're not just getting measles, you're not getting a natural measles. What they'll do is they'll take it and tinker with the measles virus and produce something that gives a much more of a strong immune system reaction. And in many cases this can actually give people measles, but a different type of measles which can be more serious. In Britain, if you refuse to have your child vaccinated, which is your right, then you often have to sign a disclaimer, not for the reasons that most people think. It's just because they don't want you suing the school if your child, unvaccinated, catches some of this tweaked measles and has a serious illness. So they're indemnifying themselves against any problems with this. But again, what it all comes down to is, I mean, obviously I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I don't want our children protected. I have a 3-year-old daughter. She's never been vaccinated and never will be vaccinated, because if we allow the body to form its immune system naturally, that's the way nature intended, boosting the immune system. Problem is there's no money in that, and there's huge money in vaccination. So we see that there's a big political drive that most parents are not seeing through, and even if they are intimidated into having to get their kids vaccinated, because if they don't get to go to kindy and they get problems at school. Even their own friends will turn against them. You know, you must be an irresponsible bad parent because you're not getting your child stuck with needles and all of this junk being put in. And that's before we start looking at what's actually in the vaccination.
Well, I think it's a really interesting and definitely a hot topic. I saw a naturopath last week that was saying that a strong immune system is the best way to go. But even she was socially almost forced into having her kids vaccinated, because of course a virus would never mutate or change at all, would it? So one vaccination will just do us for each disease.
No, you're looking at you're looking at an incredibly complex system where you see there's one truth that's known in the scientific circles, and that is that the flu jab is largely useless because of the amount of different strains of these viruses that are around. For instance, my mother gets the flu jab every year, and guess what she gets every year? The flu. And the reason she gets the flu is because she's vitamin D deficient, and we always get flu in the winter in England because there's no sun in the winter time, so people's vitamin D levels crash, and vitamin D underpins the proper workings of the immune system. So there's the huge elephant in the living room here that everyone's studiously walking around is what do we have to do to build the immune system up? And that's going to be diet, exercise, vitamin D, and low stress.
I don't think I've ever heard a doctor mention any of those things.
You won't, because they're basically Descartesian evolutionary trained biochemists. They're only interested in the solid bits of you, Ben. You go in there, with a sprained ankle or a cut or anything like that. They're fine with that. But they're still arguing in medical circles about whether or not stress causes disease. And you and I know this, you come across it on the street, that if somebody is stressed out, they can get themselves ill, no question. And your thoughts affect your biochemistry. People who are angry are more prone to heart attacks. People who are just stressed out get heart attacks. This is widely known. And they're still denying that this is happening because that opens up a whole new area they don't want to deal with right now.
Well, the interesting thing is we're seeing a lot of acceptance for quantum physics lately that tells us that it's all energy just vibrating differently. So it's foreseeable that our thoughts, our feelings and our environment can affect the physicality of our bodies, how we feel and how they function.
In truth, there's a huge amount of work being done on this. We now know a lot more than we did even 10 or 15 years ago about the quantum situation that we're dealing with in terms of how our thoughts affect our biochemistry, the actual mechanics of how that works. Let me give you an example. Everyone knows about hormones. Everyone knows that when you are stressed out, you are prone to a heart attack, but few people can actually explain how that happens. If you're stressed out, the body is producing huge amounts of cortisol and adrenaline and stripping vitamin C out of the system, which makes you vulnerable because vitamin C is a great protector of the cardiovascular system. We also see that people who are given bad news, for instance, well, Mr. Day, we've looked at your cancer scans and the cancer's all over your body, you've got 4 months to live, and I'll go home and I will die 4 months to the day. God forbid I ever disobey my doctor. So we see this whole kind of self-evident prophecy being laid down in front of people. And of course, if a doctor tells you that you've got problems with cancer or anything like that, and you believe them, see, it comes down to belief again, then there's going to be serious issues in terms of whether or not you think you can make it. Going back to vaccinations, if an entire nation, like America or Australia or Britain, is told something by a guy in a white coat on the evening news, in other words, measles is dangerous, right? See, when you and I were kids, in fact, when I was a child, we used to have measles parties. We used to, if measles came to Maidstone, right?
Yeah.
All the mums would get on the phone, oh, measles is in town, get the kids in the front room, and we'd all be sitting there, breathing over everybody.
Yeah.
You'd get the measles and I'd get the measles, and you'd be listless and disinterested for 10 days. And that's the end. That gave you lifelong immunity to natural measles, and it was very unusual if you ever got it. And same with mumps and the rest of it. So these diseases back then were not viewed as being anything other than a mild inconvenience and a nuisance. And you basically put your kids through it. That was just part of growing up. On the medical side, what we now know is that if you actually have these diseases, it not only confers lifelong immunity on you, but the immune system learns in the fire of trials, and you get a much stronger constitution, much stronger defenses. Today, what's happening is we're bypassing that whole process with vaccinations. Plus, we're jacking into kids whose immune systems, by the way, are not properly formed until the beginning of the 3rd year. We're putting dangerous chemicals like aluminium hydroxide, formaldehyde. In the UK, they use thimerosal, which is an organic, which is a mercury fixative, which I think they've largely taken out of Australian vaccines now. But these are dangerous chemicals, and if your child is autistic and is vaccinated, they're basically suffering from formaldehyde, the same symptoms of formaldehyde and thimerosal poisoning in Britain.
How amazing! And this is what we're encouraged to put into our bodies and to our kids as well.
Yeah, you're told it's fine and there's no problem. We've seen severe reactions coming in off the swine flu vaccination, off Gardasil and HPV vaccinations that are being aimed at our 12-year-old, 13-year-old girls. Kids in Britain, MMR has been a huge point of controversy, and we've all sat there watching Andrew Wakefield having his hands chopped off and nailed to the Senate door, and then disbarred. And yet 14 other doctors replicated this experiment showing that MMR was causative in bowel problems, and they never really came forward until later. So I'm saying to parents, look, ultimately it's your choice what you do with your children, but weigh up both sides, because there are two very, very diametrically opposed sides here, and people need to have all the information to make that decision.
And I also think it's interesting, I'm going to touch on the bird flu thing in a minute, but I think it's interesting when you go to your doctor, they only give you the pharmaceutical side of the story. They don't even give you both sides so that you can make your own educated decision as a patient or as an individual being concerned about your own health. So I think that's where reading a lot of books, going to seminars, and even educating yourself about how your body works and what you should be doing with it to get the best out of it really does aid in efficient decision making in your best interest, not the pharmaceutical company's best interest.
Yeah. See, I do 3 or 4 hours on the phones every day, and I've been doing that for years, 25 years. So over that time, I've spoken to tens of thousands of people, and a common complaint are parents who phone me up with damaged kids. And isn't it interesting how there's huge coercion being put on these parents? You must vaccinate, you must vaccinate. The parents want to do right by their kids, and they also want to do right by the school they're trying to get them into as well. So they get pushed into this. And isn't it strange how the people who are the most vociferous and nasty in terms of pushing them in to vaccinate their kids are nowhere to be found once these kids get damaged? And then you've crossed this invisible line, and so you're over in this situation where now you've got a child that's listless, drooling, speech problems, this whole just retrograde situation that they move into, and nobody wants to know, and all you're encouraged to do is sign up to a government program. So over the last 25 years I've looked into this. If vaccination was really working, what we would see is disease instances going right down. And when we look back into the Victorian times, they claim that smallpox was cured by vaccination, which is complete rubbish. From 1852 onwards, we embarked on some amazing social programs to clean up the environment, pipe sewage, get the food supply sorted out. And so these diseases were actually already declining markedly at the time that they bring in vaccination. And flu, well, it's been a failure from the start.
Well, from flu to bird flu, which is a relatively modern reoccurrence. And I was reading, I think it was the other week, how they're actually looking at genetically modifying birds so they don't get bird flu. Therefore, we don't have to worry anymore if we buy these genetically modified chickens. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's appalling, and it's just rubbish science once again. People are being taught to fear chickens. And in fact, there was a bunch of swans that ended up dying on the River Thames in England. Everyone was going, ooh, it was almost like they wanted to put a biohazard zone around it. It's like, for goodness sake, people will believe just about anything they're told on the evening news. They really will. And what I'm saying to people is, look, just hold your horses for a minute. You look at, we investigated the entire scam of HIV/AIDS when it came out in the 1980s, and we've got a book all about that, to show you a classic example of how people can be absolutely wound up to the point of fear, where they would be prepared to take highly toxic medications which bring on the very condition of AIDS, which is immune suppression. Same thing is happening with bird flu and this whole GM thing. You see, you've got to understand there's huge power, there's big money behind genetically modifying species. Monsanto is a classic example of this. Huge money, and yet the public doesn't want it, so the public has to be coerced and bullied. The farmers have to be coerced and bullied into taking GM seed they normally wouldn't. Farmers are bullied into not keeping their own seed, to the point where they get the heavies come around and they get taken to court, they can lose their house and farm, and all this is going on right now. So people are just being bullied, and what I'm trying to do is to say to you, look into this. It's very straightforward. In fact, my organisation and my job for the last 25 years has been to round up both sides of these scientific arguments and present them to the public and say, right, these people are saying this, they're saying that, you choose. You do your own research, you come to your own conclusions about it. And when we get the public more knowledgeable, then people don't end up getting damaged, and they don't end up having these tragedies that we've seen. And by the way, Ben, this isn't just vaccination. It's what do you do if you get cancer? What if you do if you've got heart disease? What if you do if you've got arthritis? We're dealing with the whole, we're just chucking drugs at it. And today, of course, we're the day after Elizabeth Taylor died. And bless Liz, she was a poster girl, if ever there was one, for basically pills and everything thrown at a lifestyle problem that you correct by lifestyle. And this has always been the problem, and that's why she's had all these problems over the years. And not only her, but many others as well. So we came across Elizabeth Taylor when she was trying to raise huge amounts of money in the AIDS industry. to put people with AIDS on a highly destructive medication called azithromycin, or AZT. So now we know that that thing was causing AIDS by prescription, but back then there wasn't that. So a lot of people got damaged and killed.
Well, it's amazing the difference between profitability and social conscience, and I seriously think that there should be more of this social conscience and less focus on profitability. It's been great to have a chat to you. Don't forget you can pick up Philip Day's fantastic book, Health Wars. There are plenty more books written by Philip, as well as a whole heap of information on his website, www.phillipday.com. Check it out.